Editing is all about layers. Good editing is all about layers. Layers in a timeline are kind of editing 101. You have layer, one for your video and you put layers on top of it, and that's kind of editing. But I'm talking about layers of content, types of content, and layering it together in a way that's creative and entertaining to watch. So if you look at some basic videos, cheat videos, my videos, they are kind of one layer of content. It's just me talking. It's just maybe an interview, or it's maybe just B-roll, or it's just one thing. If you can start layering in other things, all of a sudden your edit looks more complex. It technically is more complex, but it adds more complexity, visual complexity, which increases the production value and gives your overall project a higher level of quality and polish. And so if you can find ways to layer in additional things, maybe it's text elements, audio elements like sound effects, music hits. You can put in stuff like photos, which is not always like the greatest, but you can layer in B-roll. You can layer in like stock footage. You can layer in sound bites. You can layer in all sorts of stuff. Like the more you can put in your video, the better it's going to be. You have to do it tastefully. You have to have a nice artistic style. You can't just throw a bunch of stuff together and hope it works. But if you can take something that, like, let's say traditional, like an interview video. If you can take an interview, well, the next most common, easily added layer is B-roll, but a lot of people don't even do that. It's like just an interview, just a talking head. Very, very boring. I know I say that, and I'm doing just that, just a talking head, but like I said, this is a cheap video. I'm not trying to add a bunch of production quality here. This is YouTube. This is just for educational purposes only. I could add in a bunch of B-roll, and that would give it a higher perceived quality, right? You could imagine what that would look like, but unfortunately, I'm not going to do that. But you add in B-roll. And then what do you do from there? Well, you could add in additional like scenes. Maybe the B-roll has, well, I'm calling them layers, but they're just like types of content, or extra flourish, if you will. So the B-roll, if it has like a layer of audio where you can actually hear what's happening in the B-roll, and we're not just listening to audio from an interview, well, that's all of a sudden more interesting, because now we have scenes going on. We have different dynamics going on. Well, let's layer in some music and then just do like a music section that's more like a music video with the B-roll. And then we're back to the interview, and then we go to a sound bite. No, now we're doing like a quick montage of photos, and now we're going to put text on screen to tell a little bit more of the story. And now we're going to add a voiceover. You see what I'm doing? Like if you look at any well-produced documentary, they do this incredibly. They add in animation, they add in photos, but they'll usually do some kind of like effect with the photo. They'll do reenactments, like recreation stuff, where they're filming a reenactment of something someone else is talking about, or maybe they'll have it all scripted out. Maybe there'll be a voiceover. Maybe there's just text on screen telling you the story. Maybe there's interviews. Maybe there's a scene where they're, kind of showcasing what's going on. Documentaries do this really, really well. And if you want your videos to have that kind of increase, that lift in production value, study really well-made documentaries, because they are masters of this layering. And it doesn't have to be a ton of layers on a timeline per se. It's just the types, layering in different pieces of content to kind of re-engage the viewer. Because there's something that happens, like, unless you have a captive audience, like in a movie theater where they're forced to just stare at the screen, like, so I don't know if you saw the film A Ghost Story that came out in 2017. That film is incredibly boring, I would say. It's a good film. After watching it, I enjoyed it, but it is very intentionally boring. If you have a captive audience, someone who's forced to just stare at the screen like in a movie theater, or they like sit down and they play it on Netflix or Amazon or whatever, and they're watching the film intentionally, like for the purposes of, I want to watch this boring movie. Hopefully they don't, turn it off or walk out of the theater. If they actually sit through it, they can enjoy it. But content like that, that's like intentionally boring or unintentionally boring, is exactly that. It's boring. It's not going to keep someone watching by the nature of it. You kind of have to, the viewer has to have an investment in it, hoping for a payoff. And for films, there's usually that expectation that there's going to be, if it's a highly rated film or a recommended film. But with a lot of content that's produced, you have to constantly re-engage the viewer with something new, something fresh to keep them watching, you know? Like if I did that with my videos, people would probably make it to the end more than they do now, but that's not, again, not the intent of my videos. But if you're going to be producing maybe a music video, let's say, is it really all that interesting to look at the same type of shots for 3.5 minutes, however long the song is, in one environment with one lighting setup with this is what the music video is? I mean, that's like basic music video from like the 1980s of just like one thing. I'm just going to look at this. And even they got pretty creative with it. So have different scenes, have different things going on. You can have the band playing or the artist playing, doing their lip sync stuff, but then you could have a story going on, or maybe you just have a story going on, but it's, you know, told in a different order, or it has different things going on. There's so much you can do with layers and different types of content pieced together in a meaningful way to give it that value. I mean, one thing that Christopher Nolan, I don't know recently in Dunkirk and Interstellar, but Christopher Nolan, very popular, well-known director, a lot of his films incorporate this, like multiple scenes happening at the same time. So The Dark Knight definitely has this, Inception has this, where there's these different layers. Literally in Inception, they are layers. That's funny. I'm just like talking off the cuff, so it's funny that it worked out that way. But the layers of those dream sequences and cutting back and forth between them adds an extra visual interest or content interest that re-engages the viewer and builds that sense of more than just one thing is happening. And it's a subtle, subconscious feeling, but it makes the whole project, and granted, if it's a Christopher Nolan film, it's gonna feel big anyway. But with your content, these different types of content, even if it's all shot in the same day, if it's different backgrounds, different lighting, different sound, difference, it triggers something in the brain to get people to re-engage, to pay attention again, and to not get bored. And in modern time, that's the whole goal, right? Is to not people don't want to be bored. They want something fresh, something new, always re-engaging, always re-engaging, always re-engaging. And aside from that, it adds that production quality that you're looking for. It makes the most basic thing turn into something really big and really grand by adding not that much more work in some cases. You can film an interview, you can film B-roll, you can film scenes, you can do all this stuff. You can have like artistic insert shots, and you film it all in one day. You can do it in 2 days, you can do it 3 days. And the more you have, the more variety you have, the more diverse the content is, the bigger the production is going to feel. Again, go look at any good documentary, and they are masters of this and just having so much variety to keep you entertained all the way through. Because a documentary is usually kind of one of those things that's maybe a little bit more on the dry side, a little bit, the potential to be a little bit more boring. And so they really, really spice it up and add all this variety to really keep you interested and keep you hooked and feel like, oh my gosh, this is such a big production, when really it might not have been. It could all just be kind of an illusion, if you will. So just keep that in mind when you're editing. Always be thinking about layers, different types of content that you can stitch together to make something bigger than just a basic little video.